For many, Topographic Oceans it represents everything that was wrong with progressive rock. And for many Yes fans, kind of where it all goes to see. Topographic Oceans is an expansive conceptual piece that many view as a very divisive album. Rick Wakeman likens it to a padded bra, promising much but ultimately disappointing. Decades later, many fans still feel that this is kind of where it all goes to see, with the band slide off the rails in a fit of artistic hubris. John Anderson, by virtue of his lyrics and voice, is seen as the dominant personality here, which is perhaps a little bit unfair because Steve Howe is certainly one of the principal writers. And on this opus, their fascination with Eastern philosophy is fully manifest. Anderson on this likes to play around with the sounds of words and patterns and rhythms.
Craving penetrations of the links with the self-instructors, sharp and tender love.
But amid all the gobbledygookery, there does occasionally emerge a semblance of coherence. The whole thing sounds like a mantra, which probably fits the conceptual thread of the record. The original album was going to be called Tales Upon the Topographic Ocean. The word topographic is apparently culled from this short story, October the 1st is Too Late, by astrophysicist Fred Hoyle, a book published in 1966. But the title we do end up with is equally odd. I mean, topographic relates to the land features like mountains and valleys, but yes, employ the oceans as a metaphor, perhaps for the universe. Time itself stretching out, very much like this album, ever expanded with these interesting conjunctive pieces and interludes. But I have to say there is a magic to this album that isn't found on other Yes albums, even better Yes albums. You know, you immerse yourself in waves upon waves of sound. One critic has pointed out that Yes albums are a work of unearthly beauty and inhuman precision, whereas Topographic Oceans is a work of unearthly beauty that, in the words of my mother, just goes on a bit. Nevertheless, this glorious ride across this topography of musical landscapes is a thrilling one, strange and wonderful, as we all become astral travellers amid the opaque landscape of 1970s progressive rock. I mean, certainly it's true that it lacks the tightly meshed gears of a track like Roundabout or Long Distance Runaround, but nevertheless it's thoroughly beguiling with these impressive musical passages, some of the best Yes have ever produced. Steve Hackett said that instrumentally this was Yes at their peak. And Hackett is perfectly right. This album contains passages one can only marvel at. But sometimes there's a huge leap between marvelling at something and actually enjoying it. Rick Wakeman said that if CDs had been around in 1973, that would have saved this album, because they just didn't have quite enough material for a double album, so it involved a lot of padding. He says when he listens to that album, he can still hear the padding. But as a huge fan of this album, that's not what I hear. I hear the lush lapping of water as I embark on this intriguing musical odyssey. But I think fans like me ought to be envied, those of us that see the glass as 3/4 full rather than 1/4 empty. If I may quote the Prog archives, Tales from Topographic Oceans is a 4-sweet progressive poetic tapestry depicting the human perception of time and memory from simple everyday awareness right through to the oldest ages of the earth. Famously, Jamie Muir from King Crimson hands John Anderson a book at Bill Bruford's wedding. The book is Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, published in 1946. This is a hefty slab of ancient Indian wisdom which John Anderson imbibes whilst the band are on tour in Japan. Anderson is particularly struck by a footnote which outlines 4 Hindu Shastras. These would go on to inform the lyrics and themes of this record. Other influences would be the painter Vera Stanley Alder, who authored several books on spirituality which helped clarify these scriptures for John Anderson, as well as Jacob Bronowski's explanations of the of the solar system, knowledge and truth in the 1973 BBC documentary The Ascent of Man. If you'll forgive me for referring to my notes, the 4 Shastras are: the first Shastra is Shruti, relating to the message of God, i.e. what is revealed, usually through yogis and gurus. The next Shastra is Smrti, which is what is remembered. This relates to things recalled by ordinary, everyday people, often stories passed on to others. The third Shastra is Purana, not the snappy fish, but in fact the Sanskrit word for ancient. This Shastra relates to a collection of sacred Hindu literature, including myths and legends, and how man and the universe was created. And finally, the fourth Shastra was Tantra, which relates to rites and rituals, the freeing of energy and the expanding of consciousness. Tantra relates to all those connections with mind, body and soul and beyond it. And it's through our actions that these little rituals, these little connections are achieved. Anderson and Howe mapped out all the themes for this record, famously pulling a prog all-nighter. This was intended to be a single piece of music, but eventually they settled on the idea of 4 pieces, which John Anderson said would be like 4 close to the edges. The original tracks on this album had the lengths of 8, 12, 15 and 19 minutes. Wakeman at this time said the album had interchangeable parts, where the band members could elongate lengthen pieces based around the mood and the response of the audience. But already there were some conflicts emerging as to where this record would be recorded. Anderson and Wakeman wanted to record in the countryside in a huge tent, whereas Howe and Squire voted for more traditional London studio setting. Eventually they decided on the London studios, but the compromise came in the form of certain decorations to give it a country feel. Those decorations, things like hay bales and a cardboard cow with working udders. So on the 20th of May 1973, Yes enter Morgan Studios London with Eddie Offord to record this album. Wakeman alleviates the boredom of the sessions by jamming with Black Sabbath, who were in the adjacent studio recording their Sabbath Bloody Sabbath album, which Wakeman actually plays on. Wakeman at this point expresses his dissatisfaction with the direction that the band are going in, describing this new music as veering dangerously close to avant-garde jazz. He even started dismissing the album as Toby's graphic go-kart. Incidentally, it's rumoured that Black Sabbath broke the Yes cow whilst Yes were out shopping for lentils and vegan cheese. The revealing science of God. Now, John Anderson wanted a slow build of voices at the start of this after listening to Gregorian chant. Now, this is based on the Hindu Shastra Shruti, which, according to Yogananda, described as scriptures that are directly heard or revealed. The original mix of this track was 28 minutes long, but had to be cut down due to the constraints of vinyl. Now, interestingly, the 2003 mix begins with Crashing Waves, which very much fits into the creation of the universe and really suited this track beautifully, I think. Part of this song actually started during the Fragile sessions and was actually called All Fighters Past, often referred to as the Young Christians See It section. And it starts off with the birth of consciousness. We get dawn of light, dawn of thought, dawn of power and dawn of love, and builds wonderfully with those trademark 3-part harmonies that Yes do so well. And they're at the most fluid and dynamic, and let's not forget that wonderful guitar motif by Steve Howe. I think it's remarkable the way the opening lyrics intertwine and overlap. In fact, the YouTube channel Rael NYC has said, and I'm quoting, "It is like the Hindu ever-opening flower with its caresses and everlasting life." Absolutely, and it plots mankind's emerging from God through the sea, earth and air. Lots of allusions to evolving and reaching out for knowledge and love, but also laments the mistakes made and forgetting the knowledge that we once knew so well. You get lines in this song like, I can't believe our song will leave you, which is the idea that God's knowledge is passed on through the gurus, whilst lines like, we receive all we venture to give, reflects the idea of karma, chicken karma in the case of Wakeman. Remembering high the memory. This relates to the Shmurti text, literally meaning that which is remembered. Interestingly, Yogananda writes that the Shmurtis were written down in a remote past of the world's longest epic poems. Anderson describes it as a calm sea of music, and he wanted the band to play like the sea, believe it or not, with rhythms, eddies, swells and undercurrents of sound. And those oral images of the ocean are beautifully encapsulated by Rick Wakeman's swishy and swirly keyboard sounds and Chris Squire's rumbling bass. The reference to the relayer here is the relayer is an Indian guru who passes on divine knowledge to others. This echoes the Hindu concept of Shmurti, which this side of the album is supposed to be organised around. The remembering, of course, looks further back into all our forgotten yesterdays. These are the archetypes or imprinted memories which take us out of that moment or that tiny imprint of time that we currently exist in. It reaches further and further back into the history of the universe. The ancient giants under the sun is attributed to the Puranas, meaning of ancient times, and contains 18 ancient allegories. Anderson said that Steve Howe's guitar here is pivotal to sharpening the reflection on these beauties and treasures of lost civilizations. This track draws heavily upon the influence of the sun, I think, on ancient civilizations, on our civilizations. And ancient civilizations are referenced here. In fact, Anderson's notes state that he wanted to tap into distant cultures, Chinese, Indian, Central American. In fact, the concept of Purana is that which is about mankind's links with one another and our ancestors, which is what this side of the album is supposed to be about. And the tribal percussion that we get on this perfectly suits that idea. These tantric concepts of ritual, dance and ceremony, in which is referenced numerous allusions to the sun, perhaps anticipating the Leçon du Soleil part of the next side. This track is supposed to represent the raw primordial universe and those tribal drumming imaginings of various cultures in ancient times. If I may quote, "A time where the elements roamed free, unperceived as gods, giants unto themselves, a grand drama of nature playing out on a timescale so immense it seems almost foreign to us." The track ends with the acoustic section Leaves of Green. Interestingly, Alan White used a hollowed out log and brushes on an aluminium sheet as percussion. Many consider this to be a slightly disjointed coda, but nevertheless it was played as a standalone piece for many years after this album. The Ritual, which is the last track on side 4. About 4 minutes in, Howe can actually be heard playing a little motif from Close to the Edge. As well as various other sort of motifs and parts of this album. The original idea was that the album would conclude in a kind of a jazz style, revisiting all these different themes. It does represent the band's own little histories, and these connections here are being achieved within the context of this track. Ritual represents the tantras. Anderson described its bass and drum solos as a presentation of the fight and struggle that life presents between sources of evil and pure love. There's no doubt this album was a bit of a noodle scratcher, but it did well for Yes, reaching the #1 spot, beating Bowie, Elton and ELP. When the tour actually began, Wakeman was quick to state that he was leaving the band. but I think was persuaded to stay on for financial reasons at the end of the tour. The set list for this tour remained pretty consistent, with the band playing the whole of Close to the Edge and then the whole of Topographic Oceans. But by February 1974 they had dropped the Remembering from the set in favour of Starship Trooper. When this album was played live, Anderson would often include a brief discussion on the Sanskrit language or the history of that language before each movement. In the US, of course, some audiences would get out and they'd be greeted by the sight of this huge topographic hot air balloon just outside the venues. As regards the Rick Wakeman Curry story, this took place at the Manchester Free Trade Hall. Interestingly, the beautiful art by Roger Dean was actually inspired by the book The View Over Atlantis, which features illustrations of many ancient sites. Stone circles of Aylesbury and Stonehenge, various rock formations from Land's End, including Logan's Rock. Rick Wakeman, in an interview he did for Living on Music, said that he actually spoke to Chris Squire, and Chris Squire in 2002 said he would like to remix and edit it down to a single album. I find that idea absolutely fascinating. I would love to hear a single album mix of this record. Anyway, I hope I haven't bored you. I've gone on way too long about this wonderful album. If you haven't switched off, I'd like to thank you for doing just that, and perhaps urge you to share this video, like, subscribe. Check some of the links below this video for ways you can support the sterling work done at Classic Album Review. Other than that, I'll leave you with my closing salvo, which is, as you know, hope you're well, staying safe, but more importantly that you keep listening, and namaste.